This video is over Lesson 64, Classifying Quadrilaterals. Please copy the title down into your notes, and when you're ready, hit play to continue. Moving on in 3, 2, 1. Quadrilaterals can be split up into 3 basic categories. And those categories are trapeziums, and a trapezium is a quadrilateral with no parallel sides. So you can see it looks kind of irregular. The next category is called the trapezoid. And trapezoids are special because they have one pair of parallel sides. And then finally, the last category are known as parallelograms. And parallelograms are special because they have 2 pairs of parallel sides. Each of these categories has special kinds. For example, a special kind of trapezium is called a kite. Kites are special because they have 2 pairs of adjacent congruent sides. Now, a kite is a special type of trapezium, and because of that, it cannot have any parallel sides, which prevents a kite from having all 4 sides congruent. You can only have one pair and the other, but never all 4. In the trapezoid category, we have what's called an isosceles trapezoid. Isosceles trapezoids are special because the non-parallel sides are congruent. So these 2 sides that are not parallel are the same length. They're congruent. And then finally, in the parallelogram category, we have a special type of parallelogram that's called a rhombus. And rhombuses are special parallelograms because, well, first of all, they are parallelograms, but they have 4 congruent sides. So each side is the same length as every other side. Well, parallelograms also have another type of special shape called a rectangle, which should look pretty familiar to you. And rectangle literally means right angle. Rect means right, and then obviously we have angle there. And so a rectangle has 4 right angles, which, since they're all 90 degrees, means it has 4 congruent angles. But we're going to go ahead and just say 4 right angles makes up a rectangle. And then finally, in the parallelogram category, if you take a rhombus and a rectangle and put them together, you get one last special parallelogram called a square. And a square is special because it's both a rhombus and a rectangle. So it has 4 congruent sides, so all 4 sides are the same length, and 4 right angles. So as we look at our chart, the further down the chart we go, the more special the shape becomes. Quadrilaterals are just your basic shape, and then they get more specific as either trapeziums, trapezoids, or parallelograms. Within trapeziums, sometimes we have a special trapezium called a kite. So now, since a kite is a special trapezium, it means every single kite is a trapezium. But not every trapezium is going to be special. So kites will always be trapeziums, but trapeziums will only sometimes be kites. Similarly, we have our trapezoids, which sometimes are special, and our isosceles trapezoids. But since an isosceles trapezoid is just a special type of trapezoid, that means this is always a trapezoid. Parallelograms sometimes are rhombuses as well. Parallelograms sometimes are rectangles as well. Rhombuses and rectangles are sometimes squares. But a square is always a rhombus. A square is always a rectangle. A square, therefore, is always a parallelogram. And all of these are always quadrilaterals. And so, as we take a look at our chart, as we move up the chart, we say always. A square is always a rhombus. A square is always a parallelogram. A square is always a rectangle. A square is always a quadrilateral. An isosceles trapezoid is always a trapezoid. An isosceles trapezoid is always a quadrilateral. A kite is always a trapezium. A trapezium is always a quadrilateral. A trapezoid is always a quadrilateral. A parallelogram is always a quadrilateral. But as we move down, we have to say sometimes. Quadrilaterals are sometimes kites. Quadrilaterals are sometimes squares. But sometimes quadrilaterals are trapezoids. But finally, as we move from one category to another, so if I move from anything in the parallelogram category over here, we have to say never. A rhombus has to have 2 pairs of parallel sides. So it can never have only 1 pair of parallel sides. So a rhombus will never be a trapezoid. A kite will never be a rhombus because it's moving from the trapezium category to the parallelogram category. And these are our classifications for quadrilaterals. And this video ends in 3, 2, 1.